How many people are aware of the Hammond situation in Burns, Oregon? Barely. Okay. How many people are aware that Eamon Bundy and several constitutionalists have seized a federal building in Eastern Oregon? Okay. Now, I hope everybody knows it's peaceful. There's been no standoff. There's no guns. There's not a bunch of federal agents up there. There's not, nobody's staring over the barrel of a gun at each other. To be perfectly honest, strangely, the feds haven't even showed up or said anything. So it's kind of interesting what's going on. We do know later today that there was an argument between DHS and FBI over who was going to handle the situation. It is going to be the FBI dealing with it. They said that they're looking for talks and peaceful negotiation, so that's a good sign. So.
Yeah, I was listening to the news, and that's what they said at length on Fox, that the FBI was going to handle it, and they had a retired FBI guy there, and he said they're sending in their best negotiators because they don't want any confrontation at all with these guys. And the way he described it was, these are good, solid American citizens, and they're just doing what they think is right to protest what they have the right to protest.
Yeah, it is really by the grace of God that the FBI will be handling this, because if it had been DHS, it would have been a completely different situation. So that is a good thing.
The press has shown these guys to be armed to the teeth with guns. Is this true?
I haven't seen a single picture of one of them holding a gun. Well, the pictures of what they show of people holding guns and pictures of people that are actually there at that situation are two different things. So there are not guns in display at the building. There's not people walking around with guns. They're handling this very professionally. I've spoken with a lot of the other Patriot groups, Three Percenters, Oath Keepers, Constitutional Guard, guys like that. They are standing down from this situation. They do not support what Eamon Bundy and his fellows did. They think this was the wrong way to go about this. This was the wrong way to handle it. There's a lot of people that think this was a government creation. Basically, it's a battlefield of the government's creation, and a lot of people don't think that they should be on it. If you look at the land where they're at, tactically, it's not very good. Communications are easily cut off. They're not easily sustainable for a long amount of time. They don't have a good logistic supply up there. There's a lot of people thinking that they kind of walk their way into the wrong thing and are hoping to get out of this peacefully and with a little bit of face, because it has the potential to destroy a lot of the credibility and goodwill that the Patriot movement has generated over the last few years. So there is a lot of that's going on, but it also has been declared by every one of those groups that if those people are fired upon, there will be a response. So how many people know what happened with the Hammond situation and what provoked this? Okay. I guess we'll just go back to kind of the beginning on it. In 2001, Dwight Hammond, who is the owner of the Hammond Ranch outside of Burns, Oregon, lit a fire to destroy sagebrush and juniper brush on his land, to burn it out so that the grass could grow for pasture for his cattle. He actually contacted BLM that day to find out if it was a burn day and received permission to light that fire from BLM. Now, that fire managed to get off of his land and burned about 139 acres of BLM land. When that occurred, Dwight Hammond contacted BLM and informed them that it was off of his land, and BLM said, "No worry, let it burn." Okay. Now we fast forward to 2006, and we have the son Hammond, and this is back in, does everybody remember the real bad lightning fires in eastern Oregon that pretty much torched the whole eastern half of the state? Well, they were in the direct path of that, and they had BLM fire crews out there that were monitoring the situation. They weren't doing any fire suppressing. They were driving around watching it burn like they do, and the fire began coming towards the Hammond Ranch. So the son Hammond, he went out and he lit a backfire on his own land to cut a fire break to keep the fires away from the winter feed for their livestock. That fire was contained to his land except for a partial acre. There wasn't even a full acre of BLM land that was burned. And that fire, BLM allowed that fire to burn right into his land, and it was his fire break that stopped their home and their feed from going up. Okay? So BLM came after both of these guys for these cases in 2006, 5 years after the fact, for Dwight Hammond, and they charged them with arson. The county district attorney refused to take up the charges. He dropped the charges. He refused to call the grand jury. In 2012, the federal government came back again and decided to prosecute them in the appellate court, in the state superior court. Sorry. Now they took that up and they actually called a jury from a separate county out of Pendleton, Oregon. It was not a jury of their peers. There was never any evidence presented to a grand jury either in Harney County or the county where the jury was called. There was never a grand jury indictment put forth as required by the Fifth Amendment. And they went through this case, and they went through this in 2012. And of the 12 counts that were brought against the Hammonds, both were found guilty of arson, okay, in 2012. Now, what the federal government demanded at the time is that both be sentenced under terrorism charges, because they said they committed arson on federal land and that qualified as terrorism. They were actually charged with terrorism, and the jury failed to find them guilty of terrorism. Okay, the definition of terrorism is malicious destruction of federal property. The government's own people in testimony stated that no one ever believes there was any malicious intent upon the Hammonds to destroy any property. And the funny thing is when they went to assign a levy, a retribution of funds for this to decide how much value the property had been destroyed, BLM's own people testified they couldn't assign a number to that because they hadn't destroyed any property, and by burning the sagebrush and the juniper berries off, they'd actually improved the value of the land. So they have this conviction for arson that the jury came back with. The Hammonds were urged to appeal that at the time, and they said that they had no desire to appeal that. They'd been through the ringer on this thing because the federal government had been pushing them on different things, from their grazing rights, their water rights. There was a lot of other things going on behind the scenes of this, of the government trying to push these guys off the land, and this was the tool that they were doing. They said, okay, it's over, it's done, we're not going to appeal, we're going to take our sentence, we're going to do our time. The judge in that case, Mike Hogan, went to sentencing. The government urged him and demanded that he sentence them to 5 years apiece under terrorism laws. And Hogan refused for several reasons. He said, number one, they weren't convicted of terrorism. I'm not going to sentence them for terrorism. Number two, they don't meet the qualifications of terrorism. I will not qualify it that way. Number three is my jurisdiction as an appellate judge. I have the right to divine the intent of the creation of the law, and this terrorism law was never intended to go after rangeland farmers who had a fire get out of control. He said not only that, even if they met the qualifications of this law, I would disqualify this sentence as unconstitutional under the 8th Amendment as cruel and unusual punishment because, I quote, it would shock my conscience to sentence these men for this crime. Okay, so what ends up happening is Dwight Hammond does 3 months in prison. The son, because he had a prior charge where he had gotten into it with Fish and Game before, ends up doing a year. These people get out, they do their time, they complete their probation, they go through everything that they're supposed to, they're living their lives, and this October last, the federal government comes back and says, well, we're vacating the sentence and we're going to re-sentence you to 5 years apiece in a federal penitentiary, but no worries, we're going to give you, time served for what you've done already. Now, the thing that a lot of people don't understand, there wasn't another trial, there wasn't another jury called, there wasn't any new evidence presented. Essentially, they opened court. They said, I, the Superior Court judge, under the direction of the U.S. Attorney General, am vacating the sentence under arson and giving you 5 years mandatory under the charge of terrorism. They sentenced them for something that they were never convicted of. Never once have they been convicted of terrorism, but they were sentenced to the mandatory sentence of it by the federal government. That's absolutely what this fight is about. Now, the other thing that the media is staying quiet about is, along with this 5-year sentence, was a $400,000 fine for property destruction. Even though they testified themselves that they improved the value of the land when they burned it, they still levied a $400,000 fine against them. The Hammonds quietly had to put up part of their ranch for sale to pay that fine because they were given 36 months to pay it. This is while both of the men of the family are in prison, right? They're given 36 months to pay this fine. Immediately the day after they put that on the market, the BLM shows up under eminent domain and demanded the first right of refusal for purchase of the property. So that's what's going on in Burns. Now, the Hammond family has asked the various patriot groups not to intervene. They are very worried for their safety and their family's safety. They've received threats to be put into not so pleasant places in the federal penitentiary system. Their families have been threatened directly. They're refusing to renew their grazing permits, things like this. The Hammonds just really kind of want it to go away. They want to do what they can. They've folded. They've been hit in the head too many times. So what the patriot groups did last Saturday is they went up there and they marched. They wanted to show support. They marched to the family homestead. They left flowers. There's people that are negotiating with the Hammonds to work the land for them while they're in prison, to help bring in feed, to help support them financially, and hopefully see this family through the situation that's going on. As they marched past the county courthouse and the county sheriff's house, they also threw out nickels and pennies in front of the courthouse to show them what they think of the local officials. Now, at that time, it was Eamon Bundy and 2 of his brothers and roughly about 100 other militiamen from Montana, Nevada, other areas that went out and seized this Fish and Wildlife Visitor Center. They haven't engaged with anybody. They haven't taken any hostages. They didn't drive anybody out of there. At this time, we're not even sure that they are guilty of breaking and entering, because when they showed up, the place was unlocked. There's no trespassing signs. It's public land. They have stated their intentions to stay until this situation is brought to satisfaction. So that's what's going on with that, if anybody's got any questions.
There was some talk about the starting of the first fire. It was to cover up poaching by the sun.
That was only brought up in the last trial in 2012. No one had ever mentioned the word poaching for 11 years until it was actually Dwight Hammond's grandson was brought up, and he testified that he had been told to by his uncle and his granddad to take a book of matches and light the whole country on fire, and not to tell the government anything, and to cover up the fact that they were poaching deer. That is the only person that has ever said that. This is 11 years after the fact. The kid was like 8 years old at the time. His testimony at the time originally was found inadmissible. It was found inconclusive. It had been found to go back and forth on itself. They basically threw that testimony when he made it when he was 8 years old out at the time, because it didn't make any sense, and it didn't. But that is the only discussion that there has ever been of poaching. And anybody knows if you poach a deer, you don't hide it with a brush fire, because it moves too fast to destroy bone anyways.
Right.
Could you explain the sheriff's position at this point and what his position was earlier when he was asked to take them into protective custody?
He has refused. They are still pressuring him to do that. He's saying that it's a state matter, that it's not within his jurisdiction. He's been informed by many people in many letters that that is not the case. he's not moving. So he will not protect the people, neither will the supervisors in Harney County.
All right, if these people were sentenced and they put in their time, whether they were let go because of good behavior or not, they served their time, how can they come back again? That's totally unlawful, and tell them now you're going to prison.
That's the point, Bob.
Yeah, I know it is.
They can't.
What the hell country is this?
Yeah, where are we living at?
Well, that's the thing that I want to pass on too, is a lot of us don't agree and support with what the Bundys did up there. I really think they picked the wrong fight and the wrong way to go about this. But at the end of the day, these are good, solid American people that are worried about their lives and their country and their families and have been pushed too far. They're done. You know, we've been saying for a long time, it's coming. People are done. And these people are done. It's no more for them. You know, no more is today. No more was a couple of days for those guys. And it's going to happen more and more and more. This may be the situation that kicks the whole thing off. Who knows? We don't know.
This, what I see, you know, with everything that's been going on in this country, we see it happening in Montana, we see it happening in Nevada. They do the same thing. It's the same pattern over and over again. It's the same pattern that the communists used in Vietnam. When they would come in and kill the teacher or a leader of a community, it was the same pattern. It's the same pattern that Saul Alinsky pushed forward. Hillary Clinton worked under Saul Alinsky. These people are bad people.
Yes, sir, we fully well believe that there is a plan in place to destroy America as it stands and remove the Constitution of the law of the land and place us under one world order. I mean, it's time to quit talking about it and really open your eyes and understand that's the fight we're in.
Are you going to talk about these red light cameras?
Well, I was going to talk about the red light cameras. I was asked to discuss this first, Mr. Clark. I'm sorry I've inconvenienced you. I'll get right to that, though.
How could they try them again? They've already been tried once. That's double.
They didn't try them. They never even gave them another trial. Well, that's the whole thing, is they can't. This is absolute outright tyranny. They've been sentenced to a crime that they were never convicted of. They were tried and found innocent of, and the federal government has still sentenced them to this. This is blatant tyranny on the level of the United States government stating, we have no right, we have no jurisdiction, but we're going to do it anyways.
Maybe the Hammonds ought to consider getting John Kerry to negotiate for them.
Actually, I've gone through and I've read the transcripts of all of the court cases, the back and forth. They had pretty good lawyers. They really did. The problem is that they had rangeland lawyers. They didn't have constitutional lawyers.
They have good lawyers now.
No. They're
That's
broke.
what that's what they're going to do.
Then maybe that's what they
They're broke.
So, but that's the thing. There is no process where you can appeal a sentence for a crime you didn't commit. There's no legal process to even file paperwork to fight that. How do you?
Some people just say
Two-part question. Number one is, how could a sovereign state, how can that be the solution, is it? And number two, how can we help? I know you put something on Facebook today, and I will send out that link.
The White House, the Hammond family is asked directly. They've started a petition on whitehouse.gov to find clemency. I have been getting email after email back that the website will not allow people's signatures to be accepted. We think the White House turned the petition off. Yeah, I've gotten it from, I wasn't able to sign it, Karen Knorr. I've received several emails, people are unable to sign it. So, But, well, a sovereign state, he quite easily could stand right in between the federal government and remind them it's not BLM land, it's the state of Oregon's land being managed under contract with BLM. They could null and void and vacate that contract. Even the county sheriff, if he had an ounce of testicular fortitude, could vacate the memorandum of operation with the federal government and tell them you're not arresting anybody in my county and the Hammonds are under my protective custody. He could do that. He has the power and authority to do it, but he won't. But yeah, as a sovereign state, Oregon has the opportunity. They have the right. The entire thing is that the Supreme Court judge of Oregon is sovereign in this case. The federal government does not have jurisdiction. It's not federal land. It's not a federal reserve. It's not a federal court. It's not a federal matter. The jurisdiction is supreme with the Supreme Court of the state of Oregon. And if Oregon would simply stand up for that, there'd be no argument here. But they won't.
Would it make any difference? I'm under the impression that we got an appeals court judge that reinstituted the new sentence.
It was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It was the Federal Court of Appeals out of Eugene.
Right, so that wasn't the Supreme Court.
No, it wasn't the Supreme Court. Again, you can't appeal a sentence for a crime that you didn't commit.
Well, they levied a sentence for a crime that doesn't exist.
I don't know. I don't have any answers or ideas, or I mean, essentially the federal government has operated in a manner they're not allowed, yet they continue to operate that way. I have no answers what to do to remedy that, short of...
Well, good reason for Jefferson.
The sheriff has the authority to vacate what took place there. And the citizens...
Explaining these facts on your radio station or broadcast?
Yes, we are.
Are they going to start a legal fund for him?
I'm not sure what's going on with that, because essentially the Hammonds, they don't want to fight anymore. You know, to be perfectly honest, if the Hammonds said, you know, we're being mistreated, we're being treated unconstitutionally, we're not going to prison with the fight, they'd have thousands of patriots between them and the federal government. But they fear for their family, they fear for their future, they fear for, you know, they don't have any fight left in them, and you can't hold that against them. These guys have been hit in the head real hard, real long.
Well, aren't they going to jail for 5 years?
They are. They surrendered themselves today.
Yeah, they're in jail.
Well, then they're going to be in jail 5 years, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, that first judge that sentenced him, that refused to sentence him for terrorism, does he still have a job? Have they come back on him? IRS audit or something?
He's been retired out.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, Mr. Hammond Sr. made the comment on that YouTube we couldn't put up there, that the 5 years is the end for him. He will die in prison, is what he said. Basically, he believes that's the end for him. What is it, Red, that you think is going to be the next thing people can do to help in this situation, as far as for immediate, some sort of immediate remedy?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the solution to this one. I don't. You know, I can say organize, I can say write letters, and, you know, I can say, you know, get together and demand justice, but when you have a government that blatantly refuses to operate under the rule or color of law, I know one solution to that. And I don't know, it's something I don't want to say. I
wanted to just say one quick thing, if I may. And that is, today I got a call from Eagle Forum. And in that phone call, we talked about everything that's going on. Oh, well, they're doing this on my water. Oh, Common Core. Oh, carp. I'm going to say this. The silver bullet is a sovereign state. That is the only battle that is going to be something that we can fight that is nonviolent at this point, period. End of sentence. That is the remedy, really and truly. And just like what Red said, jurisdiction, interposition by the state, by a sovereign state, creates what, Red? Nullification. The laws are gone. That's what a free state is supposed to be.
Well, that's
why we've got these 8 counties that signed on that quick in the last 3 weeks. And that's why we have this going across the nation. You have to understand, a sovereign state right now is the only remedy for all of this. There are too many different passes. They're trying to hit us on too many different levels. And if it wasn't for guys like Red and Paul Preston that are out there digging this stuff up to keep us informed, it just lets us know we're on the right path. That is the answer, period. Period. End of sentence. So what we have to do, Red, is, like you said, I mean, thank you so much.
yeah.
I don't know if this would be helpful, but on KCNR tonight, Mark will then discuss this from a constitutional point of view. You might listen tomorrow. He might, to his program, you might have more to say. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
and it's
solution, but he explains it from a constitutional. I can't tell you what it is. It's too complex for me. But.
Well, there's a lot of people right now that are desperate for a solution, for a way out of this, because there's a lot of people that don't like the ultimate conclusion.
Well, what Terry just said is the way out.
Well, it is. Without a sovereign state to defend you anymore, and California absolutely is not, you are at the mercy of a tyrannical government. I mean, it's been talked about for years, but this is no longer an intellectual exercise. The rubber's meeting the road. It's here. And the sooner we realize that and convert from the thought process of, man, we got to stop this, to it's here. It's happening. You know, people say, well, how can they do this? Because they can. Because they're willing to engage in the force and ignore the law to make it happen. That's tyranny.
Ted Cruz evidently doesn't even know the story. He gives speech that they should stand down and not break these are the people protesting. They shouldn't break the Constitution. In other words, he thinks the protesters are not following the law.
Yeah, I have no idea how in-depth Mr. Cruz's knowledge or understanding of the case is. I don't know.
It seems to me that one of the biggest problems here is that people are standing up from California, people are standing up from Nevada, people are standing up from Montana. It is the people of Oregon who need to get together and pressure within their state to get it right. They're the ones that need to get together and put pressure on the officials in the state of Oregon to declare they are a sovereign state and the feds are out of bounds.
There is a lot of that is going on. They're trying to follow through the channels of the law. They're going through the Farm Bureau. They're going through their representatives. They're doing all of the steps that good citizens should do to find satisfaction from their government, and it's falling on deaf ears.
I think the one thing that we maybe all could do is send emails to everyone we know in Oregon and say, you need to get on board and support these people. Your state's being taken over by the feds.
Anything. I mean, at this point, like I said, there's a lot of people looking for a solution. It's anything that you think could help, anything that you could do to help. Send letters if you think that's what you can do. You know, write officials if you think that's what you can do. You know, it's kind of to the point where every man needs to decide for himself what the solution is and what the meaning of that is.
We can't even, in this city, can't even elect a council that would represent the people. Look who we got.
Maybe it's time we do something about that.